I'm Tobias from Australia, and welcome to Thorin's YouTube channel. It's a choke-free zone.
I know what you're thinking after watching the Navi versus Heroic match, seeing Navi, the champions, obviously make their way to the semi-finals, looking great on that last match, and now here I am in a video. That's right, the king is back. It's me, the king of esports. Esports itself, let's be real. I am Counter-Strike and esports and whatever I say I am, funny or not. But tell you what, how does the king, me, how do I actually keep this top-level performance going match to match to match, even when I'm not at the major? Well, you know, I drink the Gamers Up Store now, sugar-free, delicious flavours, doesn't taste too chemically. You can get 10% off with the code Thorin, THORIN, at gamersups.gg. Now, of course, there was a thrilling match between the guys from Heroic and Navi. Not so much in some of the other matches. ENCE won fairly handedly. Obviously, previously, we already talked on the other days about the FaZe series and the Spirit one. But we've ended up with semi-finals that are really interesting because, first of all, the Dream Final is still on. You've got the reigning major champions last time, Navi, trying to go repeat. No one knows if their players are going to play together. Seems like probably some of them have to leave or one of them has to leave. Then you've got the whole factor that you want FaZe Clan against them because then it's like Simple gets 2 majors or Carrigan gets 1 major. Obviously, FaZe Clan's the #1 team. Obviously, they won the lands this year. They're both in position, but they're both playing underdogs who look really dangerous. Like, Spirit is the revelation of the tournament. Like, the idea they've gotten this far, and they have some of the strong, they're like 3 of the top 9 rated players in the tournament, and some of them are just nobodies. They're basically rookies. It's unbelievable how good these guys are. Then you've got the whole factor on the other side of ENCE. Now, ENCE is an underdog, but you look how good they are. Look where they are in the world. You look at their beating. You look at their map pool. Like, they're only an underdog because it's Navi. Like, if there's anyone except Navi and FaZe, we're at the point now where they should be the favourite. If this had been Heroic, spoiler, I think I was going to say ENCE was the favourite to beat Heroic. I actually think I would. I think there's many teams down the line. NIP, you can go down the list. I think they would beat most of these squads. Gambit, if they'd have been here and hadn't shit the bed, etc. So let's get into these series, shall we? So first of all, we'll start in chronological order. We'll do the FaZe versus Spirit matchup. Now, the interesting thing for me is this. Before I get into all the map pools and what goes on, because of the firepower of Spirit, people are going to really start to believe now. I noticed it was the experts picking Spirit, like me, Yanko, a few others, to win. But I noticed a lot of fans just went with the classic, like Fury or Will, because like obviously Fury's a team we've all been waiting years to break out properly, especially this last lineup, when they seem to have done it by putting in Safe, but he just hasn't been a top player at the tier 1, quite frankly, on these lands in this type of a team. But the interesting thing for me is this. I also feel like, unfortunately, they are primed for 1 or 2 of these players to just have an average series or have an off day, especially when you run into the map pool of FaZe, especially when you've got such a bevy of stars and with such different playing styles. I think the way they complement each other in FaZe is beautiful. So the thing is, what's cool about FaZe is it's the same as it always is for these guys. Beyond the kind of each run of Brokey, they don't actually need their players to go they don't need their players to be like 1.25 each or like some Navi shit of like, I'm 1.35, well, I'm 1.27, and I'm also, it's like, no, they can just be like 1.1 something players, and that's enough because they win clutches, because they do sick entries, because the AWP of Brokey actually has become sort of like a pivotal mid-round tool now, because Carrigan even sometimes has the odd map where he frags out, because Raid actually was doing a lot of fragging earlier on in the tournament. So they've just got such a phenomenal team. I do think the best team in the world is FaZe Clan. It's the best team in this tournament. The biggest firepower is over on the guys, you could argue. I mean, it's the other 3 teams, isn't it? So it's also a really interesting matchup as to who goes and wins it. And by the way, obviously we're going to have to entertain the idea, what if Spirit goes to the final? That would be probably the craziest run to the final, maybe ever. That's even more crazy, I think, than ENCE, maybe, although ENCE was more underpowered. But like, at least they had like Alu, they had people that you at least had an idea might be good in the team. You go and look elsewhere, then you have to look at the idea ENCE makes the final. By the way, if ENCE makes the final, look, they've already played FaZe as well. So like in theory, you think, oh, whatever. And will they hold up? I don't know about that. Spix is, by the way, the best player in this tournament right now. I don't think that's even unfair to say. So, man, there's so many great narratives can come out of this one. I'm low-key pulling just for the old Boomer final in terms of the Navi versus FaZe, though. So let's get into this one. In terms of FaZe, obviously, they played the series against NIP. As I told you, that could be a close one, and it was looking like it was going to be on that 3rd one, but FaZe managed to come through. They managed to get what they needed to done. They even could, in theory, have won 2-0 1 on Nip's map pick, but it didn't happen. But okay, that's fine. FaZe isn't a team that blows people out, smashes them. They can beat a lot of teams 2-0 because they can play so many of the maps, like the Mirages that get picked into them, etc., or the overpasses even occasionally. But the problem is, because they don't have the monster fragging constantly, they tend to sometimes go to 3 maps in big ones, but they do close out and they are a clutch team. Like, this team is anti-choke. the way they come back on some of these games, think of the finals they've been in, think of this match here on Inferno, they are a special team. I feel like it's like the whole core knows this is the time. Then you go over to the Na'Vi guys, they look great on that last map, but even then, Simple was losing loads of scenarios, he was losing 1v1s, he lost to Pistols. It's just that Electronic woke up and it became Landtronic, didn't he? Just went God mode, one of the great series of all time. So I can't wait for this one. Now, in terms of FaZe though, in that series, they didn't really show anything we didn't know. I actually think it's a fairly complete team. So it's more about the Spirit side, especially when we come to the veto. Because the interesting thing for me is this. When you look at it, FaZe, presumably, this is the problem, I also don't know who goes first, but I'm saying FaZe will ban Vertigo because, let's be real, they basically always do ban Vertigo anyway. Now, it's not a great map for Spirit, but are you going to pull that out or float it in the major semi-final? Again, I would. But then again, I mean, Carrigan hasn't won a major yet. Maybe you play this one because you are the better team and you've got a better map pool. So you can just go with the safe one. So yes, you ban Vertigo if you're FaZe clan. If you're Spirit, like you already ban every single time Inferno anyway. And spoiler, like FaZe, that might even be their best map. And I would say they're the best Inferno team in the world. And you just saw what happened to NiP. So you get that straight out of there. So at least Spirit, by the way, gets potentially FaZe's best map out. Now this is where it gets sexy for me. Because I actually think for FaZe, it's a tough one as to what you pick. Because with Inferno out, do you go with like a Mirage? That's actually a 50-50 map for the guys from Spirit. They lost to a bunch of low-level teams there. I could see that being a very nice punish pick. The other option is maybe you just go straight into your nuke because you do like it. It's one of your best maps. You won 7 of your last 7 on it. With that said though, it's a strong map for them as well, right? They've even had a couple of wins over top teams like Heroic. So I think you can go with either for that. I would just go with the Mirage because it's more of the punish pick. The problem with that is they also might expect it. So then is there even a world you'd throw in something crazy? Would you dare to go elsewhere? I don't think so if you look at the rest of the pool because obviously Spirit bizarrely always have Dust 2 and then they're actually not even that bad on Ancient. Obviously, they won the last 5. So I think overall, if you look at it, you probably go with the pick like I say. You put in that Mirage if you're FaZe clan. Now if you're Ancient, now if you're Spirit, you got 2 choices I think here. You either go Ancient, because you just won a bunch of them recently, and it's a map that, I mean, I thought if you look overall, FaZe clan, it's not a map they're specialised in, it's not like they have a lot of big wins in, they don't have any basically, and so as a result, that's not a bad one, or you can go, you are in a major semi-final, you don't know if you'll ever be here again, you want to play your best hand, you can go with your Just 2 if you want, you can go for the power game. I personally would go for Ancient here, I think you should make the other team more uncomfortable, also I think Dust 2, like, listen, the guys from FaZe can just sneak and steal that from you. So I think it's better at this point in time to pick Ancient. Then I think FaZe clan, if I just look through all the maps, bearing in mind they will play some Dust 2 if pushed to it. The question is, which would they rather play in the last map, Dust 2 or Overpass? Now, here's a key detail to understand about the veto. If they say, well, I don't want to play Overpass too, so I've got to get that out. Well, if you get Overpass out here, think logically, because all you'll have left is Dust 2 and Nuke, and you're really good on Nuke, so is Spirit as well, but they can go to their Dust 2, which you're not as good on. They're just going to ban out Nuke, and you have to play Dust 2 as a decider, right? So that scenario, I mean, do you really want that? You're basically going to be playing Mirage, Ancient, and Dust 2. Those are 3 of the top 4 maps of Spirit. I mean, I guess maybe not top 4 for the Mirage one. Actually, yeah, whatever. The 2 of the top 3, at least you're going to have to play those. So that's a tough one. You're giving Spirit a lot of chances and comfort there. I actually think what you do instead if you FaZe is this is where you ban Overpass. And the reason you ban Overpass here is because not only did you do it at the RMR against Copenhagen Flames, but I think if you ban Overpass, then Spirit has to pick between Nuke and Dust 2. And as I said, it's a scenario like before where basically you'll get them to pick against the Nuke, which you would actually like them to pick potentially, and you'll just play Dust 2. And I think in that scenario, look, you're in another tough spot, but this is the only way you can get to what you want to play there. Do you really want to play Overpass as the decider? I don't know. This is a tough one. I also remember Carrigan always is willing to potentially gamble here. With that said, though, almost regardless of the maps, I do think FaZe is going to win. I think experience is going to bear out. I think the fact that they don't have to have one guy hard carry ever in this team is so powerful. I think Carrigan is at the peak of his powers right now. And I think Spirit has had an insane Cinderella run that I sort of expected at least to start to flag a little bit against Furia. I think it will have times. There'll be like a map where someone doesn't do well or they have a bad start or they lose a bunch of the key rounds, a force buy or something. I think that eventually it gets to Spirit and they do the Looney Tunes, you run off the cliff, but then you look down, and then you go down eventually. And by the way, it's already good enough, so I hope they just give a good account for themselves, maybe 3-map series, frag out a couple of players, but I think FaZe is the better team. They should win. I think they will win. Then I go over, obviously the other one is is the ENCE versus Na'Vi. Now, what's mad is that was obviously on paper the famous semi-final. If you go way back to IM Katowice in 2019, 3 years ago, right? The spring major there. So that was the one where it was obviously all the ENCE of LXEB and Alu and all those guys, X7, and they shockingly beat Navi. You remember that was the one where Simple was going to win the 1v4, but they switched away from the AWP around the try box on Mirage, and he obviously lost the round, I think it was 2x7, and that basically, he was hard carrying the series in that map, and then that sort of lost the map and entered to the final and got brutalised by Astralis. This time around, ENCE is actually the team where, like, thus far in the tournament, you could arguably even, they were keeping up with the Navi in terms of firepower, but they don't have anywhere the experience. This is a massive pressure game, but what's cool is this. 1, Spinx is holding up so far. 2, Dika's been really good. Even Hades got it together finally, and I've seen him have issues at this tier 1 with the AWPing. I think he's going to have issues, quite frankly, against Simple. So you know what? Actually, with the way Simple's played this tournament, Spinx can be as good as him. Spinx can be better than him on some of these maps. Is Electronic going to turn up? If he does, now it's going to get a bit tough for someone like Dihad to keep performing like that. That's the issue for me. If all the stars, if the trio turns up for Navi, or 2 out of the 3, they're going to be in a great spot in terms of fragging. Now, I think the interesting angle for me overall is the map pool. I think actually that both Navi and ENCE might pull some hijinks here. And I think if you're ENCE, that's what you really have to ask yourself. Because I think we get an idea of what the picks might be. But that last map, they can really choose to go many, many, many ways in this scenario. So obviously, ENCE just cruised through Copenhagen Flames, while Navi actually did get pushed a bit. Even on the blowout, they're having rounds that were looking dodgy against the guys from Heroic. Simple wasn't that great over the series. It took Electronic to get them through. So you look at it overall, I think you go with the standard ban, of course, which is if you are the guys from ENCE, you ban Inferno, they always do. Then you go over to Navi, they always ban Vertigo, right? You better do that, by the way, in this scenario, because like, you're just never going to play ever in a big match, are you? Like, this team perma-banned it even when they were the best in the world. You're not going to suddenly open it now. So the permas make obvious sense, and everyone knows that. Then the question is, what do you pick, though? Because they have shared map pool aspects. And as a result, that's really the question for me. I'm really wondering about this one. Because I actually think if you look at it overall, I actually thought ENCE was going to pick Nuke, because they're so good on it. They have a phenomenal record. And it's just a situation where that's where I would feel confident in a semi-final. But mate, you just saw the way that CT side went for Navi. Like, Navi's actually going to think, hey, we have a chance of you players on that one. Or even maybe the logical map you should pick. And the other thing is this. Both teams in terms of, like, big win rates, maps they play the most, both play Mirage the most and clearly like this map. So I also think if you're ENCE, if you go first, for example, in the V2, I don't know which order it'll be, if you just pick Nuke, Navi might even either pick Mirage into you, or you can keep floating it and let it be the decider. So that's what I would do. I would go with the Nuke pick. Not guaranteed you'll win it, of course. But at the moment, I would actually argue maybe ENCE is the better Nuke team. It's just they haven't been in a big stage scenario, blah, 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 all the rest of it. You all know the story. Then if you go over to Navi, assuming that maybe they pick Mirage here. Again, if you want to go safe, just go safe and then play out the game, and we'll just see who's better. We don't have to punish. Then for the second vetoes, I actually think if you're ENCE, logically, if you look at, there's Overpass, Dust 2 and Ancient. So if I want like an Ancient to be a decider, which by the way has been 11-3 for these guys last few months, obviously it's 7-0 for Navi, but they barely won that fucking heroic game and it was looking dodgy for a while. I want that as my decider to make all the maps comfortable if I am the guys from ENCE. So I actually think they ban Overpass. And if you ban Overpass, which yes, is a dodgy map, look, if you're really ballsy, you could pick that into Navi, but I don't think anyone's going to do that in a big semi they haven't been in before. You ban Overpass, then Navi has a choice, Dust 2 or Ancient. They just kick Dust 2 right out of there. I mean, it's not a good map for either team. And you just play Ancient as a decider. Spoiler, on these maps, Mirage, Nuke, Ancient, I'm sorry, that's just too good for the guys. That's 3 of the top 4 maps of Navi, in case people aren't aware. Now look, do you want to know something cool? Mirage, Nuke, Ancient. Those are the 3 best maps of ENCE. I think this can be a banger series. This can be 3 maps. They can do to Navi potentially what Heroic did. In fact, they even have a Spinx where sounds like a very good rifler, but he's a star player / borderline superstar player. So like he's superstar player numbers, but he doesn't break the game, he doesn't force it to as well. Spinx is starting to get to that unless he faces someone like Prime. Simple, he is just the best player in the server no matter who they play. He's actually like, it's ridiculous that he's on a team that's so low down in terms of like salary, circumstances, like fame, etc. So right now they have found absolute gold with this guy. This is like when Suarez went to fucking Liverpool that time. Then again on the Navi side though, they can have crazy firepower. Spoiler, you know, before it was like Electronic was quiet, so it was like Simple, like Bit was at the top, then it was like Perfecto, then I think it was Simple or Simple and Perfecto swapped around. Now Perfecto chilled a bit, Electronic's right back up, and the big trio's there for Navi. That big boy trio of Simple, Bit, and Electronic. Bit didn't have the greatest series against Heroic. That's like some Neymar, Messi, Suarez shit, mate. Like, that's unfair that you can have them. Not least because, like those guys, they're all the 1A option for another top team that could potentially win everything. And you've got all three in your team. Like, Bit, that's a little bit of an exaggeration. But hey, if Electronic goes to another team, I think you'll see. As long as he can go to Lands or somewhere, I don't know what's going to happen in his career. Nobody does. He could still be a monster. He could have carved out his own career. He's some legendary shit against Heroic boys. So if you look at the map pool here, I actually think logically, it just is like a let them play. Let's not do any silly punishes. This is the time. You can just get your best maps against each other. And I actually think you just play it out. The problem here is this. The inexperience is on ENCE's side. The chance to break's on ENCE's side, I feel like. Someone like Saw hasn't coached in this kind of a scenario. I expect that Navi's going to be going ham on the demos before this, especially because they're the second game. Then finally, Simple hasn't even played truly Simple at the major style yet. He hasn't even played at his peak. I think he's going to get better, and by the final at least, he's going to be warmed up. So I think actually the problem is I can't bet against Simple, and I can't bet against the firepower of Navi, and I love the ENCE team. If it was anyone except FaZe or Navi, I'm picking ENCE, but I ain't picking them against Navi. And I think Navi's going to win this one overall. And I actually think we get the dream final. FaZe versus ENCE. And that could potentially be one of the greatest series ever played. And obviously the implications narratively so phenomenal for the game itself and for the game's history, right? This video was kindly supported by Ahmed Hadjou, Matt Pugnatio, Rajcula, Kyle R, Pacy, Travis Goff, ochs, Animosity, BotPounder420, Hades, Jensen Goh, Joseph Ginsburg, Kovacevicd, Tobias Bernasconi, Thooorin, Zoomba, Zyrathenia, and a special thanks always goes out to Jerky's Minion. Would you like to find out who upcoming guests are going to be? Maybe even suggest them on the topic for my content. Maybe you want to appear in one of those lengthy esports discussions with me, or ask me a question for my video AMA. Well, if these perks, or indeed any of the others available, intrigue you, then join the Screw Illuminati today. Put the money where your mouth is. Where? In the description box below, and the Patreon link.